All right, today we have a few concepts: muscle fatigue, aging, and rigor mortis. Muscle fatigue first. So here is a relaxed skeletal muscle concept. So that means the muscle demand for ATP or energy is low. There's plenty of oxygen for mitochondria to produce ATP using aerobic respiration. Oxygen is going to be diffusing slowly into the muscle fibers. Everything is great. Now, when we have some low or moderate level of activity, I get some increased demand for ATP or energy. I get more oxygen diffusing into the muscle cell, so I have more oxygen being used by mitochondria to make the ATP. The respiration rate, as a result, increases. So you start breathing faster to bring in more oxygen. And again, oxygen is going to be diffusing faster into the muscle cells. So that's what occurs when there is enough oxygen. So either at rest or low to moderate activity, your breathing rate, your rate of respiration is able to give enough oxygen, provide enough oxygen to your muscle cells for you to be able to continue performing cellular respiration. But what happens when you have high activity? The muscles continue to demand more and more energy, more and more ATP. More and more oxygen is being used by the mitochondria to make that ATP. And the respiration rate increases, but it literally can't keep up. It can't bring in enough oxygen. Oxygen can simply not diffuse fast enough into the muscle fibers. So now we've got a problem. We have to do something new. Since the muscle fibers are not getting enough oxygen to meet the demands for ATP, for energy, the cells switch to a process called glycolysis, all right? And glycolysis and fermentation. Okay, and this results in anaerobic respiration that doesn't require oxygen. So both processes are going to start with glycolysis, but instead of moving forward with the aerobic respiration path that requires oxygen, the cells are going to have to divert some of that to fermentation from glycolysis in order to make enough ATP despite having not enough oxygen. Okay, so glycolysis and fermentation results in the production of lactic acid. And then when this lactic acid builds up, muscle fibers can't continue to contract. So we start to see some muscle fatigue. What is muscle fatigue? Well, it's a decline in muscle force over time. So remember, there's a high demand for energy. We get the most energy if we go through aerobic respiration using oxygen. But in high demand, we just simply aren't producing enough ATP with the oxygen available. So there's just not enough oxygen. So we need to make more ATP. So we switch to a little bit of a less efficient process, and we use glycolysis paired with fermentation. And this produces some ATP, but it also produces lactic acid, which we'll talk about. So when is a skeletal muscle fatigued? So when does it get fatigued? Well, when it can no longer contract despite having nervous system signals sent to it telling it to contract. So there are signals being sent. You want to move your muscles, but the muscles simply aren't able to contract. They're fatigued despite getting the signals. So the signals are coming through just fine, but the muscles are fatigued. So what causes the fatigue? Buildup of lactic acid. So, and that's because there was a high demand for ATP that we weren't able to make up for, like sprinting, or it could be over a long period of time as well, like in a marathon, when we have exhausted all of the energy reserves. So it could be something where there's a high demand for energy in a short period of time, or consistent, long demand for energy. So we've used up our reserves. So how do muscles recover? Well, we have to remove the lactic acid and we have to replace the energy reserves. So remember, we get fatigue because either we build up lactic acid or we use up the energy reserves. So in order for the muscles to recover, we have to remove the lactic acid and restore the energy reserves. In addition, muscle contractions builds up heat, right? It produces heat. So the heat generated has to be removed. And those are through thermoregulation processes like vasodilation and sweating. Well, how can you reduce muscle fatigue or reduce the likelihood that you'll have muscle fatigue? This is not a 100% you're going to be able to prevent it, but let's talk about it. A big thing is hydration. So drink water. Lactic acid is water soluble. So if you are well hydrated, it will be easier to clear out the lactic acid. That's a no-brainer. Breathe deeply, diaphragmatically, in through your nose, out through your mouth. Use your diaphragm, belly breathe. This brings more oxygen in to help prevent switching to fermentation that produces lactic acid. Monitor your heart rate. Keep your heart rate in the appropriate range. So the maximum heart rate for any person is 220 minus your age. So if you're 20, your maximum heart rate is 200. If you're 50, your maximum heart rate is a lot lower, right? But the range for cardio is going to be your max heart rate times somewhere between 65 and 85%. Let me show you a graph. So here's sample heart rate range. So someone who's 40, their maximum heart rate is 180. The cardio range is going to be 65% of 180, which is 117, and 85% of 180, which is 153. So that means when I'm doing cardio activity, my target heart rate should be between 117 and 153 if I'm 40 years old. Okay. And that is for right here, you can see your target heart rate. Now, if you want to burn fat, you need to bring your percent down lower. So you don't want your heart to be beating as fast, okay? If you switch into this 85, so if my heart rate goes above 153, I'm switching into high intensity and I've switched to anaerobic, my body can't keep up, okay? So in that cardio range, that's where you're gonna most effectively work your heart. If you want to burn fat, though, you can see from here, you're going to want your percent of your cardio range lower. Be cautious when lifting weights, okay? Lifting weights requires more oxygen. So increase your repetitions and weight gradually. What do I mean? If you're doing bicep curls with 20-pound dumbbells, don't switch from 20-pound dumbbells to 50-pound dumbbells, okay? If you're doing 10 reps and 3 sets each with 20-pound dumbbells, don't switch to 20 reps each. Okay? Increase the repetitions and the weight gradually. Go from 20 to 25-pound dumbbells. Go from 10 to 12 or 15 repetitions. Okay? Or add 1 set. So if you're only doing 2 sets, add 1 set. Then increase weight. Then increase repetitions. Okay? Don't do it all at once. If you're feeling a burn, that's literally your body's way to tell you, hey, slow down, it's too much, okay? That burn is a defense mechanism to prevent overexertion. It's your body telling you to slow down, to lower the weight, to decrease the repetitions. Take a step back. Hey, listen to your body. Stretch before and after a workout. Why? Well, it helps warm the muscles up. Afterward, it's going to help to release any lactic acid that may have built up. You should eat a balanced diet. Some of the vitamins and minerals that are important for muscle use would be magnesium, fatty acids, and B vitamins. This is by no means an inclusive or exclusive list. There are many more. These are just some examples. You should work out frequently. Okay. If you are more physically fit, your body gets more efficient. Your heart beats more efficiently. Your lungs breathe more efficiently. You will burn less glucose and less lactic acid will build up. But some things to consider as you're working out frequently. You should alternate your exercises. That gives time for repair in those muscle groups and gives less chance or risk of injury. Rest is literally so important. So you're going to work out your arms one day, your legs one day, then do cardio. Okay. Or do however you want to break it up. Give your body time for rest. Give those muscle groups time to repair. In addition, take rest days. Rest days help us restock that glycogen, our energy storage. Rest days reduce the risk of injury, allows for repair. Super important. Now, our storyline theme is Duchenne Muscular Dystrophy, right? So how is that related to fatigue? Well, fatigue affects people with DMD. They have overwhelming feelings of tiredness. Why might they be feeling that? Well, their muscles are weak. That's literally part of muscular dystrophy. Those muscles are weakened and they're unable to carry out the daily demands for walking, for running, for whatever it is. The fatigue in DMD may be acute. That means during a specific activity. So why? Why might someone with DMD have acute fatigue during an activity? Well, the muscles simply don't have sufficient energy to accomplish that task, like walking up the stairs, okay, or brushing hair, whatever it is. Someone with DMD may also experience chronic fatigue. What is that? Well, that's persistent and long lasting. So why might someone with DMD have chronic fatigue? Well, the diseased muscles have lost the capacity to maintain maximum levels of force. So the muscles are just not strong enough to consistently be able to do everyday tasks. So what are some contributing factors to fatigue? Well, probably the most obvious is weakened muscles. So the muscles simply cannot generate enough force. This affects the ability to complete activities, sustain activity. In addition, another factor is respiratory insufficiency. Well, the diaphragm is a muscle, and so the diaphragm will also be weakened. Because of that, this can result in low levels of oxygen and high levels of carbon dioxide, which affects, in addition, the acidity of the blood, creating even more problems. All right, now not specifically related to DMD because that's not an aging disease, but what happens to muscles as we age? Well, as we age, muscle fibers change. The skeletal muscle fibers become smaller in diameter. This reduces strength, it reduces endurance. The muscles will fatigue more rapidly. Okay, that happens naturally then with aging. In addition, the muscles become less elastic. Why? Well, because fibrosis or scar tissue has replaced aging muscle cells. Remember, skeletal muscle doesn't really repair itself well. Neither does cardiac muscle. Smooth muscle is the only one that does a decent job of repair. So that means instead of being repaired with skeletal muscle, any tear or defect is going to be replaced with scar tissue, and that doesn't contract. So fibrosis has replaced those aging muscle cells, and the fibrosis or scar tissue is connective tissue, mostly collagen, so it doesn't act like muscle. What else happens as we age? Well, the tolerance for exercise decreases. Why? Because you are more likely to fatigue rapidly. You are less able to regulate your body heat because the blood vessels have a harder time dilating and contracting. Your ability to recover from muscular injuries decreases. Well, repair is even more limited, and it usually results in scar tissue or fibrosis. This decline in muscle performance literally happens in all people. So, is there anything you can do about it? How can you help reduce the effects? It's going to happen anyway. It happens as people age. But can you do anything? You sure can. You can regularly exercise. And I don't mean extreme exercise. I don't mean to start running marathons if that's not your thing. What I mean is walk regularly, lift low weight dumbbells, or do low resistance activities regularly, or just walk. It's good for you. All right. Now, not necessarily related to aging, but related to death, what is rigor mortis? Well, rigor mortis is something that occurs post-mortem, after death. It results in a stiffening of the body's muscles after death. All right, so what happens with rigor mortis? Well, the muscles are going to stiffen and lock into place. It typically begins about 2 to 6 hours after death, and it peaks about 12 hours after death, but it is temporary. Okay. It can last 24 to 84 hours post-mortem. So beyond that time period, there will be no more rigor mortis. Okay, so that stiffening is temporary. But why does it even happen, right? Why does rigor mortis happen? Well, there is depletion of ATP. So we have actin and myosin that are working together to contract a muscle. And we need ATP to separate the actin and myosin cross bridges. So without ATP, the cross bridges are locked in place because the muscle cells have some ATP hanging around for when it's needed. So after death, it uses up some of that ATP. But what happens is those muscles get locked in place. That results in rigor mortis. Now, eventually, decomposition starts to break down the cells. And this actually breaks down the actin and myosin myofibrils, breaks those cross bridges, and the muscles relax. So that stiffening, that rigor mortis after death is temporary. Hope you learned something.